You ever have one of those moments where you're staring at your portfolio, looking at XRP sitting there like it has something it isn't telling you? And deep down, something whispers, this thing, this one right here, could change everything in one night. Not because of hype, not because of speculation, but because XRP is tied to a global financial system that's on the edge of a transformation so massive, so irreversible, that most people won't even realize what happened until it's already over. And the crazy part? You feel it. You may not have the exact dates, the exact documents, or the exact meeting rooms where decisions are being made right now. But your intuition is screaming that something big is coming. Something that compresses years of price movement into hours. Something that turns the quietest, most ignored digital asset into the most explosive wealth transfer event in modern financial history. This is why people say XRP holders are delusional. Because they don't see what you see. They don't understand that XRP isn't built to behave like a normal crypto. XRP isn't riding the hype cycle. It's riding the regulatory cycle, the institutional cycle, the financial plumbing cycle, the cycle that moves trillions, not billions, through rails the public never sees. When that cycle flips, XRP isn't just going to go up, it's going to reprice instantly. And that repricing moment, that overnight flip, is where millionaires are made. Think about it. The entire global financial system is preparing to migrate to real-time settlement. Not faster payments. Not same day. Not quicker international wires. No. Full, instant clearing and settlement on a unified messaging and liquidity layer. Banks are not optional in this transition. Governments are not optional. Corporations are not optional. Everyone must move together just like they did in 1971, 1988, 2008, and 2020, every time global finance reset itself. Now ask yourself, which network is positioned to solve the biggest bottleneck in that transition? Which digital asset has legal clarity, institutional integration, enterprise software, liquidity pathways, and a functioning infrastructure that's been stress-tested for a decade? It's XRP. And that's why the overnight millionaire scenario isn't fantasy. It's baked into the architecture of how global adoption happens. Because when the switch flips, it doesn't flip slowly. It doesn't flip in stages. It flips the same way every major financial system upgrade has flipped throughout history. Suddenly, instantly, and with irreversible finality. One moment the world is operating on outdated settlement rails. The next moment, the new rails are live, and liquidity must route through them immediately. If XRP becomes the liquidity bridge for even a fraction of that transition, the demand shock will be violent. Liquidity needs won't wait for candle patterns or RSI indicators or influencer predictions. They will be systemic, mechanical, and instantaneous. And in those hours, yes, hours, the price won't move like a retail-driven asset. It will move like a utility-driven asset responding to global volume. And here's what most people miss. The majority of XRP's price suppression comes from uncertainty. The majority of its unleashed value comes from clarity. When that clarity is fully triggered, regulatory, institutional, and geopolitical price doesn't rise. Price corrects to its real utility range. And that range won't look anything like the numbers retail traders argue about online. Because those numbers were never the point. XRP was built for corridors, banks, governments, CBDCs, and system-level liquidity flows, not for retail speculation. That is why your moment, your millionaire moment, won't look like a normal bull run. It won't look like a meme pump or a hype cycle. It will look like a system reset. Imagine waking up and seeing XRP at a number you've never seen before. Not because someone called it, but because infrastructure finally demanded it. Because liquidity corridors finally opened. Because the world's settlement needs finally aligned with the technology that was built to handle them. And imagine watching the reaction. People confused. Markets scrambling. News outlets rushing to explain something they ignored for a decade. Retail investors stunned because they can't fathom how something that moved sideways for so long suddenly exploded. But you wouldn't be shocked. You'd be calm. Because you knew the truth all along. XRP doesn't rise like a normal crypto. XRP snaps into place when the system needs it. That moment, your moment, doesn't require hype. It requires readiness. It requires infrastructure. It requires global demand. And all three are converging at the same time. This is why XRP can make you a millionaire overnight. Not because of fantasy, not because of dreaming, but because the world's financial plumbing is shifting, and XRP is positioned exactly where it needs to be when the switch flips. And the craziest part? Most people still don't see it. But you do. There's something people always forget when they talk about XRP, and it's honestly the reason most of them will miss the moment that changes everything. XRP isn't competing with crypto. It's competing with the legacy system. It's competing with SWIFT. It's competing with the slow, outdated infrastructure that the world's banks are desperately trying to replace, but can't do so without a neutral bridge asset. And when you understand that, the idea of XRP exploding overnight stops sounding crazy and starts sounding inevitable. Because think about it, the entire global banking system is locked into a structure where moving money isn't actually moving money. It's sending messages, waiting for confirmations, reconciling accounts, layering fees, adding delays, managing liquidity, and absorbing risk. And that system worked in the 1970s, 80s, even 90s. But in a world where value moves at the speed of data, where trillions can flow digitally, where CBDCs are being built by almost every major economy, the old rails become a liability. They slow trade. They slow growth. They create friction no government can afford anymore. That friction has a cost, a massive one. And the moment global institutions reduce that cost, even by a small percentage, the value unlocked is measured in trillions. Now ask yourself, which digital asset has spent the last decade building precisely the rails, partnerships, corridors, and liquidity infrastructure to plug into that moment? Which asset already has banks integrating its technology? Which asset has an enterprise stack being used right now, not in theory, not in hype, but in real production? It's XRP. And this is where most people miss the plot. The reason XRP can create overnight millionaires isn't because it's a speculative rocket waiting for hype. It's because the adoption cycle isn't public. It isn't loud. It isn't something influencers can track in real time. It's private. It's institutional. It's negotiated behind closed doors by banks, regulators, and governments who don't make announcements until everything is already finalized. This is why you keep seeing these quiet clues, regulatory frameworks, interoperability tests, pilot programs, partnerships, cross-border trials, settlement experiments. All the things people brush off because they don't cause immediate price movement. But that's the point. XRP moves when the system tells it to move, not before. And that's exactly what creates the overnight effect. You're not waiting for retail to wake up. You're waiting for institutions to switch on. And here's something most people don't realize. Financial systems upgrade like dominoes. One bank activates a new standard. Then the next must follow. Then the next. Not because they want to, but because they're interconnected. Once the first domino falls, the rest don't fall slowly. They fall instantly. And the asset sitting at the center of those liquidity corridors gets repriced by that cascade. One that retail won't see coming until it's too late to buy and cheap. Liquidity requirements don't rise gradually. They spike. They surge as corridors open. And real institutional liquidity isn't measured in millions. It's measured in billions and trillions. When a system that large needs an asset, the asset reacts violently. Here's the part that keeps most XRP holders steady, even when the chart looks dead. They know the price has nothing to do with the future utility. They know the silence is engineered. Markets without regulatory clarity behave like coiled springs. They build pressure. They suppress true value. They create an artificial ceiling. But once clarity is established, the spring doesn't uncoil slowly. It snaps. That snap is what creates the millionaire-making moment. A repricing event. A liquidity shock. A system-level shift. And XRP is sitting perfectly between three forces that are all converging at the same time. First, regulation. When the rules become clear, institutions who were waiting on the sidelines won't have excuses anymore. They'll deploy capital, activate corridors, and move liquidity through compliant rails. Second, technology. Ripple has spent years quietly building an ecosystem banks can plug into with minimal friction. These integrations don't show up on CoinMarketCap. They show up when corridors go live. Third, global necessity. The world cannot keep using outdated cross-border systems in an economy moving faster than ever. The pressure for real-time settlement is increasing every month. When these three collide, XRP won't rise like a normal asset. It will correct to its real function. And that correction won't unfold over months. It will unfold over hours and days. That's the heartbeat of an overnight millionaire event. Imagine a scenario where several major corridors activate at once. Instant settlement becomes the standard overnight. Banks begin routing liquidity through ODL automatically. Market makers need deeper pools. Liquidity providers must hold XRP to facilitate global flow. This isn't hype. This is math. This is infrastructure demand. And when the system suddenly needs more XRP than the circulating supply available on exchanges, price has only one direction it can move. Up, aggressively, violently, and faster than retail can react. This is how XRP creates millionaires overnight. Not by hype, not by speculation, but by infrastructure meeting demand. Most people are too busy looking at the daily chart to understand the bigger picture. They don't see the meetings happening. They don't see the pilots running. They don't see the partnerships forming. They don't see the domino setup being completed. They only see action when the dominoes start falling. But XRP holders? They're positioned at the first domino. They know exactly what's coming. And when it hits, it won't be a normal pump. It will be a financial reset moment. One where the future suddenly arrives all at once. There's a moment in every financial revolution where the system doesn't slowly evolve. It snaps into a new form. And when you zoom out, you realize XRP is positioned exactly at the edge of that snap. But the wildest part? The reason XRP can change your life overnight isn't just because of adoption, liquidity, or regulation. It's because of something deeper, something people rarely talk about. Timing. Timing is everything in crypto. Timing is the difference between holding a life-changing asset and watching the opportunity pass like a shadow. Timing is the reason early Bitcoin holders are rich and late Bitcoin buyers feel like they're chasing ghosts. And right now, XRP isn't just undervalued. It's mistimed by the market. It's misunderstood. It's mispriced because the world is still using metrics that no longer apply to the future financial architecture being built behind the curtain. That's why XRP feels quiet. That's why the chart looks boring. That's why every move feels muted. Because the timing of XRP's real value isn't tied to retail cycles, it's tied to infrastructure cycles. Big money doesn't move based on hype. It moves based on necessity, pressure, and deadlines. And those deadlines are approaching faster than the average investor realizes. You can feel it when you look at banks preparing for new messaging systems. You can feel it when governments begin testing CBDCs. You can feel it when the IMF and BIS use language like interoperability, instant settlement, and cross-border liquidity optimization. These aren't random buzzwords. They're signals. They're breadcrumbs. They're the quiet whispers before the system flips the switch. And here's what makes XRP the most unique asset in this entire transition. It doesn't need mass retail speculation to explode. It doesn't need hype cycles. It doesn't need influencers. All it needs is for the global system to turn on the rails Ripple has already built. When that happens, price action will not resemble a typical bull run. It will resemble a liquidity revaluation. Sharp, fast, violent, and completely unapologetic. Picture it for a second. You go to sleep with XRP sitting at a price that looks like it has for months. Range-bound, boring, predictable. You wake up to headlines about a new corridor going live in Asia. A major banking group activating ODL. A global remittance provider shifting from Swift to Ripple technology. At first, you think it's just news. Then the price begins to move, but not like a normal pump. It gaps up, jumps. You refresh the chart and it's climbing, and climbing, and climbing. Because now the system needs XRP, not traders. And that single detail changes everything. When institutions suddenly require XRP for real utility, liquidity dries up instantly. Exchanges don't have enough supply. Market makers begin purchasing aggressively. Large players begin accumulating at any price necessary to meet demand. And the price doesn't rise in a slow staircase. It rockets in a straight line. That's the overnight millionaire moment. Not because of luck, but because of positioning. People always think becoming a millionaire with XRP means catching the exact top. But that's not true. Life-changing gains happen because you were early in the timeline. Because you were willing to hold the quiet phase most people ignored. Because you understood that silence is the last stage before impact. XRP's timeline doesn't operate like the rest of the market. It operates like infrastructure. Infrastructure doesn't grow gradually, it comes online suddenly. And when it does, it transforms everything around it in one motion. That's why this moment matters. Because XRP isn't preparing for another hype cycle. It's preparing for activation. And when the financial system activates something, it doesn't whisper. It doesn't warn you. It flips the switch. Let's slow down for a second. Not to kill the hype. No, we're keeping the energy. But to acknowledge something people always miss when they talk about overnight millionaire moments. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Most overnight millionaires didn't get rich overnight. They positioned themselves before the overnight moment. And XRP? Right now, it's sitting in one of those strange, quiet, extremely uncomfortable zones where nothing looks like it's happening. And yet everything is quietly being rearranged behind the scenes. This is where the life-changing setups start. Think about it. You don't get a global settlement token approved publicly. You don't get 80 to 90% of the world migrating to ISO 20022. You don't get central banks rewriting liquidity rules without needing a bridge asset that closes the gaps instantly. And you don't push the entire financial world toward real-time settlement without preparing the digital assets that will actually power it. So here's the real question. Why does XRP sit at the crossroads of all of this? Because XRP is the only asset designed from day one to handle the volume, the speed, the compliance, the messaging standards, the liquidity routing, the institutional scale, and the regulatory maturity needed for a global reset of value. And let me say this clearly. If the financial system ever needs XRP, if banks ever flip the switch, if institutions ever move from experimenting to deploying, if CBDCs launch internationally and must connect using a neutral bridge asset, then the price of XRP doesn't have a choice, it must reprice. And I'm not talking 10%. I'm not talking 50%. I'm talking multiples. Rapid, violent, aggressive multiples. The kind of move where you go to bed in frustration and wake up staring at your screen wondering if the app glitched. But here's the twist. Most people won't experience that moment. Not because XRP won't move, but because they sold too early. They got tired. They got bored. They got frustrated by the slow months. They got shaken by the fear, the lawsuits, the delays, the media attacks, the narratives, the FUD. They mistook quiet for dead without realizing quiet is always where the setups form. XRP isn't designed to reward impatience. It's designed to reward positioning. And if you've been holding, if you've been doing the research, if you've been connecting the dots, then you already understand this. When the world finally needs what XRP provides, the reprice won't wait for anyone. This is why some people will wake up millionaires. Not because they're lucky, but because they refused to walk away before the moment arrived. The truth? XRP doesn't need everyone to believe. It doesn't need hype. It doesn't need a fan base. It only needs the world to reach a point where real-time settlement and global liquidity are mandatory. And we're getting dangerously close to that point. So as we move into the next cycle, ask yourself, are you positioned for the moment, or will you watch it happen from the outside? Because if XRP ever gets activated at the scale it was built for, overnight millionaire won't be a meme. It'll be a headline. Before you click away, listen. If you're holding XRP, or even thinking about positioning before the next major move, you cannot afford to miss what's coming next on this channel. Because the next few months, they're going to separate the people who watch the bull run from the people who benefit from it. So do this right now. Hit that like button so more XRP holders actually see the truth. Subscribe if you're ready for real research, not recycled hype. And turn on notifications, because the next video drops a breakdown that every crypto investor needs before the market flips. This channel isn't just content. It's a roadmap, and the people following it early, they're going to be the ones celebrating later. Let's finish this run together. Stay tuned. Stay ready. Stay positioned.